Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. Our first since Tuesday night's election results came in. Republicans had a huge night here in Indiana, but we still don't know the full outcome for control of Congress. Republicans won all 3 statewide seats, plus a second term in the U.S. Senate for Todd Young. So what should we expect in 2023? And what's waiting for us in the 2024 election? Our government reporter and political reporter, Garrett Berquist, puts those questions to Republican Senator Mike Braun.
Joining us now is Senator Mike Braun. Senator, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So at least initially coming out of this election, a Republican majority in the Senate, not really guaranteed, certainly still possible, but would be slim at best. What happened on Tuesday night?
So, whenever you have expectations going into a midterm or even a general, I know when I ran back in 18, it was just 4 years ago, almost to the day, I don't think I was ever ahead in a public opinion poll and ended up winning by 6 points. So there have been issues, I think, on making these predictions, and I don't know that we've got that science down right. Looks like in the past we've underpolled a conservative. This time maybe it's gone the other way. So who knows how that works. I think it's still something that needs to be fleshed out to be more accurate.
How does this plan affect what Republicans plan to do when the next Congress convenes in January?
I think it is a good question. I think the House has been clear that they're going to lay out a business plan for the country. I'm a big believer in that. I think if we as Republicans want to run the show in D.C., tell Americans, tell Hoosiers what you're for. And I think that's something we need to work on. I think the election itself isn't surprising because we've been kind of divided with very narrow margins for a good while. So I don't know that either side has effectively communicated, not only with their own party members, but increasingly, I think independents elect a lot of the swing state senators and the president, and they are ones that I think want some plan laid out, and I think you owe it to your own parties to do the same thing. So if we do that, I'm going to be interested in weighing in on it, and I think we need to then articulate it in a way that resonates.
What will be some of your priorities in the next Congress, particularly if Republicans take control of the Senate?
So we've got the issues that we've been grappling with as part of this election, and I think that goes beyond just the economy and with the inflation that is now embedded within it. We've got issues on our border. We need businesses are crying for more workers. Legal immigration is something that needs to be addressed, but that's got to be paralleled, I think, with border security. Crime was an issue that I think really resonated in New York. That's why that gubernatorial race was so close. And then you've got the issues of high cost of health care, which gets no attention when you've got all these other issues. Back in 18, that was up there pretty high. The economy was pretty good. And we did have the best economy pre-COVID that I can remember. I'm only 4 years off running a business for 37 years and ought to look to see what was working then, take the best of that and be for that, and then address the other issues if you're going to put a full offering out to the American public, which I think it deserves.
Turning back to the election for a few minutes, did your party go too far in supporting candidates who, among other things, embrace conspiracy theories about the 2020 election?
I think that'll have to get sorted out because we're going to have cases of, was that the situation? Arizona, right there in front of us. Also need to look at Indiana. It was a stellar night for Republicans and down ballot. We're electing commissioners, county councils in my own home county, which was a blue dog Democrat county 20, 25 years ago, all Republicans elected to the county council. Look to see what's working. Ohio had a good night. Florida, an exceptional night. We need to learn from what's working in states that we did do well and then try to parlay that into a national message and also learn where we didn't do well.
If the GOP does take the Senate, what do you foresee in terms of investigations into the Biden administration?
Well, I think those will most likely occur in the House. If we do take the Senate, that means that our chairs will be running those committees, and I think where there is a real need for it, we should look into whatever the issues might be. I don't think we should be retributive about it, so I think that is a decision we'll have to make. Investigations are mulling over the past, and sometimes you've got to do them because they're needed. Again, I think if that dominates the landscape and we're not looking on a few policy issues to present to the American public, I think we can expect the same results.
Some members of your party have called for impeaching President Biden. Where do you stand on that?
I think that when it comes to that, you're continuing that kind of mentality of the Hatfields and McCoys that has largely been the dynamic since I've been there. I don't know that that's gained either party. So if there's a valid reason to do it, I think it's part of your constitutional duty. If you're doing it just for the sake of doing it, I think we've learned a lesson from that in terms of what happened, when we've just gone through that.
You're up for election in 2 years, and that same election, we will have an open governor's seat because Governor Eric Holcomb will be term limited. What are your plans for 24?
So I've been asked to consider that shortly after I got elected senator. My focus was on doing what I've been proud of. I got a great legislative team, a great constituent service back here in Indiana, and we've accomplished a lot. More bills than I think any Republican senator or congressman or woman in 21 of some substance across the finish line. We'll be close again in 22. I've got to make that decision because it's either or. All I can tell you is I will declare what I'm going to do publicly here very soon.
Do you have a rough timeline for that?
I'd say likely by December 1st, so right around the corner.
We'll definitely have to keep our eyes peeled for that.
I'll be happy to come back in and talk about it once I do declare.
All right, coming up, the race for mayor of Indianapolis. The first candidate enters the campaign as Joe Hogsett raises doubt if he'll run for a third term. Next on All Indiana Politics. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics. We're just 5 days past the 2022 election, so let's go ahead and start talking about 2023. It started Thursday afternoon when Democrat Robin Shackelford announced she's running for mayor of Indianapolis. Shackelford has spent the past decade in the State House of Representatives, including as chair of the Indiana Black Legislative Caucus. Today, she's one-on-one with our Scott Sander.
Announcement to run for mayor at this time right after the midterm elections. Why now in terms of the announcement, and why now for you?
So I will say, people have been wanting me to be mayor ever since I got into the State House for over 10 years ago. And my answer has always been, I'm good where I'm at. But recently I just started looking at how can I have a bigger impact on our city, considering that I only represent a portion of the city as state representative. But as mayor, I can represent a greater part of the city, the whole city, and have a greater impact. So that's why I finally came out and going to run for mayor.
At this point, we don't know who you'll be running against. Mayor Joe Hogsett has not committed one way or the other. He has indicated to us a decision's probably coming by the end of this month. If he would come out and say, I'm running again, would that change your decision at all?
So I would say no, it's not going to change my decision because my candidacy is not based on anyone or anything, only my role and my goal to improve our community.
And to that end, in your announcement, you made it very clear. You see some sharp divisions between your view of where the city is and where it could be and where it stands right now and the current administration's plans for it. Outline for us what you see are the key differences and why you feel so strongly.
I definitely believe that we can do better, especially when it comes to public safety. Right now, I see us focusing more on law enforcement and what happens after the crime has been committed. I firmly believe that we got to focus more on the preventive side, looking at those root causes of crime, also looking at gun safety, and looking at how do we engage our youth. Right now, those things are not being considered in a way that is balanced. So we have more on the other side where we're just looking at the after effects in law enforcement. That's just one of those key areas where I see differences in our approach. You
also call out lack of support for people who are hungry, and you talk about the roads as well. In some ways, this almost feels like a campaign that someone from a different party might wage against the incumbent. Are you at all concerned about, or are you excited by the fact that this is taking on directly the current administration?
So I would say I'm excited and I'm concerned. The excitement comes into I want to offer Democrats a choice. And I don't believe that if we're going to live in a democratic society, that there should just be one candidate at all times and one at a time. We have to be more embracing and more open, which I think we've seen in this last election, because we had individuals who felt like I have a voice and I'm representing a different voice than the current administration is in, and we saw a lot of those candidates actually win. So going forward, I'm excited about making sure that our party is more diverse and more inclusive, but at the same time, I don't want the Republicans to take it as there is internal fighting in our party. There is actually growth taking place in our party.
Is part of this an announcement to the administration, listen, you need to listen, there are some things that we're not doing correctly, and if we're going to keep this office, whether it's you, whether it's the incumbent, some things need to change?
Exactly. So we have to send a message to the current administration that there are alternatives. There are other approaches that work better, and there are people who can do it better. So that's the message that I'm sending.
As we mentioned, you're not running against anybody yet, at least until somebody else declares. How do you spend the days, weeks, and months ahead?
Most of the time I will be out campaigning. I will be out listening to our community, listening to their needs, their concerns, what are some of their solutions, and then also investing in research, because the solutions that I bring to the city, I want to make sure that they're evidence-based programs that have worked in other cities. And I want to bring new and fresh ideas. So my time from here into the election is going to be really putting together that platform, that policy piece, which I hope to have by the time I file in January.
Have you had much conversation with the mayor or with his team? And if not, would you want to?
So I did have a conversation with the mayor and with party leadership. I did let them know my intentions of running.
How was that received?
It was received, I would say, pleasant and greatly. There was no malice, there was no harm. We sat and had a conversation for over an hour, talking about the party, talking about improvements that could be made. How do we see slating? How do we see some of these positions? So it was a very fruitful conversation. I think people think that it might have been confrontational, but it wasn't. We had a very great conversation.
Did anybody try to talk you out of running?
No, nobody tried to talk me out of running.
Looks like you've got a road ahead. Thanks for spending time with us today.
Okay, thanks.
Coming up, Indiana's best political team talks wins and losses in Tuesday's voting. Next on All Indiana Politics. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics, as we welcome back two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Ariel Brandy and Republican Whitley Yates. Good to see you both. Whitley, you get the first word this week. A big night for Republicans on Indiana's ballots.
Absolutely. We had wins up and down the ballot. And honestly, I wasn't actually surprised, but there were a lot of people around the state who were surprised. I think Republicans have consistently delivered for Hoosiers, and that's what you saw once again on election night. I am a little sad that Jennifer Ruth Green did not clinch Congressional District 1, but we are still going to be actively working on that seat and continuing to connect with Hoosiers and spreading the Republican message because it works.
Ariel, there was a lot of hope for Destiny Wells and Tom McDermott. What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw straight ticket voting once in the end prevailed, and that is what ended up holding us back at the end of the day. I will say the Indiana Democratic Party ran a very historic ticket. We ran 3 women statewide, which we saw being very receptive of the voters. And while we didn't have very many successes, we did have some in some key areas. We picked up Victoria Garcia Wilburn, and we also picked up Andrea Hunley, Kyle Walker, and we were able to prevail in CD1, which a lot of folks were thinking that Mervan wasn't going to be able to hold the seat, and we were able to. So while statewide we may not have been very successful, we did still have some strong points as a party.
Whitley, were you surprised by the Marion County Prosecutor's Office race, the outcome?
No, I wasn't necessarily surprised by the outcome. I think that there's definitely a giant blue wall around Marion County, and breaking in and having a message that consistently wins for Republicans is going to be hard because we just don't have a strong base here. The beauty in that is that it seems that the Democratic Party and Marion County are going to be ripping each other apart, which makes a nice pathway for Republicans to come through, to allow the cannon fodder on the left to continue and to bring solutions to those in the city.
Well, let's talk national politics now, and we'll talk about the mayor's race here in a moment. But Ariel, was a big day nationally for Democrats.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things about national politics right now is we are seeing the wave of young people who played such a great part in democracy. I know we saw it in 2020 and we saw it again. And so they helped determine the outcome of this supposed red wave that was supposed to come, and it ended up not happening. The youth showed up and they showed out, and that is something that I think is very promising for the future of this country. Also, still all eyes on Georgia for me. I'm waiting to see how that all shapes out and for us being able to hold Congress.
Yeah, that going to a runoff. We're all keeping a close eye on that one. Whitley, there really wasn't a red wave. It was more like a ripple. What happened, in your opinion?
You know what I think is interesting? I'm not sure if I said there was going to be any type of wave or tsunami, but what I found is that there wasn't a lot of change. So what that tells me is that the messaging from either side hasn't been able to propel or move people to do anything. And so what needs to happen is a realignment with what Hoosiers and what Americans want all around the country. I think we are going to be able to capture the House. I think Senate's probably going to be 50-50 at this point. And so what we need to know is, what is it that Americans want? What are they looking for? What messaging resonates? And what solutions or tangibles can we provide as a party? And I think that needs to happen really quickly before 2024.
Well, let's turn now to the race for mayor here in Indianapolis. Joe Hogsett tells us that he's 50-50 on running again. Does his lack of decision so far make any difference in the campaign, Ariel?
I don't think so. I think right now, I mean, personally for me, I'm still focused on us making sure that we get these election results for this cycle certified before we start thinking about 2023. I think everyone's ready to go into the next cycle, and I'm ready to dig into the data of what happened this time around. There is a lot of inroads that both parties, I think, have to make before we look at what's going to happen in 2023. We got to figure out how we get more voters out to vote. The voter turnout was very low in Indiana. And when we're looking at good quality candidates, we have to make sure that we're bringing that to the ballot for both parties as well. So I'm excited to see what happens, but thoroughly waiting for this election cycle to completely be certified and done before we talk about 2023.
Whitley, you're shaking your head in agreement.
Yes, I am. We haven't even counted the mail-in ballots yet, and they're already announcing for next year to shift our attention from this election to the next. Now, I'm not saying it's too early necessarily, but I think that, you know, Mayor Hogsett running again would probably be the greatest thing for the Marion County Republican Party, because we've had 8 years of his leadership and we now see where the city is. Knowing that there is a candidate that has announced before the mayor, to me, seems like a power move in and of itself. And I'm interested to see how the factions within the Marion County Democratic Party are going to respond to that, and the power players that be. Knowing that Ms. Shackelford does not have to give up her seat and she can still be a legislator, run and then run again to keep her seat. There's a lot of safety there for her. And so I'm interested to see how that's going to turn out for them. But more importantly, for Republicans, it provides an avenue for us to come in. And
well, Whitley, I want to follow up, and I only have a minute left, and I want to get back to both of you. Do Republicans have somebody that can beat him?
I think we do.
Who?
I think we definitely have someone that could beat him. I think we have a couple people that could beat him, but it's not about what I think, it's about what Marion County is looking for. And so I know just from being around, speaking with people, meeting with coalitions, that they're not pleased with his level of leadership of the city.
Ariel, I want to get you in here real quick. I have 30 seconds left.
Right. Yeah. Robin Shackelford, she comes with a wealth of experience. It's very exciting to see a Black woman jumping into the race. I am all for Black women being in leadership and being able to bring new ideals to the table, but also to be able to show that leadership that we so greatly deserve in the state of Indiana. So I'm honestly very excited to see how this ends up shaping out. More so less concerned about the division folks think is going to come within the Democratic Party, but more about seeing what we can do moving forward.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. Ladies, always good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. Have a great rest of your weekend.